Every year or so, I boot up a certain video game to properly commence the transition to summer. Call it a silly ritual if you will, but it's something fun to look forward to for me. A couple of years ago, that used to be Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, but I lost my copy of the Legacy Collection in my house, so it might be a while before I catch up with Naked Snake once again, but when I do, man, what a thrill that'll be. But since last year, that video game has changed. Rather than visiting the Soviet Union, I've revisited Old Shoshone National Park in the Wyoming wilderness of 1989, and that video game is Firewatch. My dear viewer, my name here on YouTube is Pollymacho, but feel free to call me Alex. I'm gonna be your park ranger for this video game tour. So grab yourself some trail mix for the journey, no, a Ziploc of M&Ms doesn't count, use the bathroom and drink plenty of water, because it's pretty hot out here in Firewatch. Firewatch is focused on Henry, a 39-year-old who is going through a difficult time in his life, the most prominent issue being his wife was diagnosed with early onset dementia and has reached his lowest point. But as his parents-in-law are looking after their daughter, Henry notices a job as a fire lookout in Shoshone National Park. Seeing as it's an excellent opportunity to get away from it all, Henry takes the position, moving away from his home in Colorado and into the Wyoming wilderness. When he arrives at the watchtower, we are introduced to the only other human contact we have in the game, our supervisor, Delilah. They have fun together, and it seems like the two might get along pretty well. It starts out relaxing and just what Henry needs, until it becomes a conspiracy that leads to distrust and paranoia between our two characters. Welcome to Firewatch. One of the best things about Firewatch is how the game presents its story, and in a way, only a video game can. Watching a movie is a passive experience. You watch the characters go through arcs and make decisions in the plot, but you're an observer. In a medium like video games, you play an active role in the story. The main character isn't someone you watch, it's someone you inhabit. In other words, it's you. And when doing this, games have to approach this uniquely. Either the main character is a blank slate for the player, allowing them to have their actions define their character in the world, or they're seen as their own individuals. Players can choose their actions, but their personality and outlook are purely their own. Or a mix of the two, varying in quality depending on what you're looking for as a player. It's not my place to say the best objective approach because every video game has its own creative and mechanical objectives. They're trying to accomplish their own goals. I can only give my personal preferences of what I really like. I'm mentioning this subject because what is so unique about Firewatch is how the player character Henry feels both his own individual while also a construct of the player. I think that really comes down to how the game handles choices. Rather than choices being narrative branches that shift the story on path A or path B, Firewatch uses choices to add characterization to Henry. These choices don't change the story, more like they adapt to our experience of it. For an early example, these teenagers are shooting fireworks, and it's pretty illegal, so naturally it's your job to get them to stop. On your way to the lake, you'll find leftover beer cans, fireworks, and a fire that hasn't been put out. This is one of those moments, where the game lets you add characterization to Henry. Is he the type of guy who would clean up after someone else, picking up every beer can on the park grounds, or just walking past them? Would he confiscate the whiskey sitting on the rock, or just leave it there? Even confronting the teenagers adds to this. Do you try to be as patient as you can, more direct and neutral, or angrier? Even being able to take their boombox that's right next to you and toss it into the lake, that decision is up to you. This makes your connection with Henry feel more personal because your actions shape the character's direction. This feels much like the Witcher 3 approach with Geralt. While there aren't many dialogue choices at a moment, the few that are there are responses that fit well with the character, any option feeling very natural. A lot of that comes down to the voice actor for Henry, Rich Sommer, whose tone and delivery for the character feels believable. It feels authentic to this character, and I think he was a perfect choice for the role. His performance feels so organic whatever way you portray him, from sarcastic, witty, happy, annoyed, or angry, but in a deep simmering way where you're trying really hard to downplay it, but you are fuming on the inside. An additional point that makes this such an engaging experience is the walkie-talkie. As you travel around Shoshone National Park, the most used tool in your arsenal will be this small machine connecting you to Delilah. The walkie-talkie is your gameplay mechanic for engaging with the game itself. When you come across something interesting or see this image on the side of your screen, that is the indication that you can respond. For PC controls, you simply hold the left shift button, then scroll with your mouse to whatever option you want, then let go of the key and Henry will respond. It's a small detail, but it makes the dialogue feel natural and engaging. There's a time limit for how long you have to respond, so it keeps the natural flow of the conversation. And especially for the long stretches of space, you will have different conversations with Delilah, ranging from a variety of topics, from tasks about your position, to off-the-cuff discussions about random subjects, to even the forming of inside jokes between the two, or I suppose three of you as the player. The conversations are delightful, and in addition to connecting you to your player character Henry, it also makes you grow an emotional attachment to Delilah. She's just a voice on the other line, but much like Henry, her personhood feels believable, with an amazing vocal performance done by Cissy Jones. I could listen to Delilah talk about anything, and rather than thinking, oh great, more talking, like I would in some other games, here I'm looking forward to them as a treat. Like if she's talking about her life back home, I'm thinking, oh sick, let's crack that one open, what's going on? Listening to what she has to say and eagerly awaiting the opportunity to respond. Here are a few samples for you.
Okay, you're probably just rebelling against a mom who wishes you had given her grandkids, by the sound of your voice, at least 15 years ago. You come out here and it really grinds her gears and you love it. Can I sleep now?
Well, she also says I fuck immature men, but in my defense, who wouldn't want a 28-year-old with ambition and energy and some fire in his belly in bed?
Me, I'm going now. You know, I don't think there's any fictional character I hate more than Forrest Burns.
Henry, as an employee of the Forest Service, that is treason.
Yeah, well, he really freaked me out as a kid.
He inspired me to spend the bulk of my 30s keeping the wilderness safe.
A shrink would have a field day with you.
Thanks, Mom.
What kind of name is Forrest Burns anyway?
Well, that would be a pun, Hank. A glorious pun.
I went to junior high with a guy named Royal Butts.
Royal?
Butts.
I didn't think anyone had been named Royal since the 1850s.
Well, Royal's mom, Flo, was a bit of a trendsetter.
Flo Butts? Oh man, that's even worse.
Yeah, well, it's still better than Forrest Burns.
The chemistry between these two is a delight and makes the experience unforgettable, but it also highlights a really interesting focus of the game. That being, Delilah is the only person you constantly interact with. Each of you is the other's lifeline out here in the wilderness. But now's a perfect time to talk about the park itself. For this experience, you'll be traversing the park of Shoshone for the game's runtime, but exploring this landscape is really cool and multiple elements go into this. One of the most immediate points is that Firewatch looks like the prettiest girl at prom. It's so beautiful, and I love the game's look and the art so much. Nearly every step feels so picturesque, making inhabiting this world such a delight, because it makes you excited about what visual spectacle you're going to see next. It captures that feeling of exploring the woods and seeing a striking vista, just looking at it and going utterly speechless with how good it looks, with impressive uses of color that make it unforgettable. The game's visual look was done by Ollie Moss, who's also done many other excellent creative works, and this game goes to show his talent on full display. And fun fact, I love the art so much that I have a poster of it in my room even before I played this game. The game adds additional mechanics to make traversal more than just walking from point A to B. Rather than being a straight shot, the park winds in different directions with routes vertically and horizontally. It's pretty easy to get lost, so be sure to bring up your map constantly. Instead of having a mini-map where you can just focus on that, the map has to be actively brought up at a reference point. Your compass helps you align with what direction you're going. Additionally, you can use ropes to grapple down cliffs, and come across a camera that can be used to take pictures of landmarks and nice vistas. And located on the map are ranger cache boxes that, upon solving the secret and mysterious combination, can have some goodies inside, such as shortcuts that can update the map, additional conversation topics with Delilah, and the occasional gadgets such as flashlights helping you to go exploring. These elements combine to make exploration in the game feel player-driven, even though it's a linear experience. If you really like this virtual landscape, there is a free play mode that allows you to explore without having the story get in the way. For what I've heard, it also has a day-night cycle, which is pretty sick. Okay, after going through the appealing aspects of this setting and narrative stuff, it's time to cover some things that might not be great. This is a subjective topic, but it's ultimately up to you if this is something you can dig. So, in Firewatch, there are two particular points that I want to cover for deal breakers. First is from an interactivity perspective. While I mentioned earlier that exploration feels player-driven, that's only if it's something the player is actively engaging with. If not, the game can feel like a walking simulator, where putting one foot in front of the other is the most mechanically satisfying aspect of the game. So I would say if this concept doesn't interest you and you want to play something more focused on its gameplay systems, this recommendation may not be your jam. Additionally, and this is the biggest one, I imagine if you've heard anything about this game, you probably listened to some discussion on its ending. And to talk about it, I'll need to get into spoilers. I usually say you should skip this section, but this is a special case. Because Firewatch is a narrative game, one of the most interesting things is how it handles its ending. A couple years ago, when I heard it, I was baffled at how it ended. But as time has gone on, I actually really appreciate it, and I would love to talk about why. If you're interested in that, I would be delighted if you stuck around, but if you really want to discover it for yourself, have a great time, and I'll see you at the next one. I'll go into it in 3, 2, 1. Alright, cool. So Firewatch builds up suspense as it goes along. The two teenagers we encountered at the lake have gone missing. A mysterious figure is in the park, eavesdropping on Henry and Delilah's conversations. Like a forest fire, the plot is heating up to an explosive conclusion, giving us the answers we desire. And when we get them, it's not a bombastic and triumphant conclusion. It's actually really sad. The two teenagers are found in a completely different part of the country. It turns out they just ran away from home and have been found. The mysterious stranger was just a park ranger named Ned Goodwin, who's gone into hiding after taking his introverted son out to the park a couple years ago. The boy plummeted to his death when some of his climbing gear failed him. His body was discovered years later by Henry. Ned didn't cause the death, but rather than taking accountability for this, he's living in the park in hopes of just living out the rest of his life alone. The reason he's been keeping tabs on Henry and Delilah is that he's just trying to be left alone and make sure nobody's coming after him. And the final moments of the game are Delilah and Henry talking as a rescue helicopter picks up our leading man. When the two characters talk about what they're going to do next, and then as Henry is rescued, the game ends. And when I heard about this ending, I kept thinking I wanted more. I wanted a sense of triumph. We solved this mystery. I didn't want Ned to get away with this. He didn't even bury his own son. I wanted more time with Delilah. But that's not what I got. And looking back on that, over 2 years later, I really appreciate this ending. And I think it's a strong reason I keep coming back to it. Henry left his life problems behind to be a park ranger, away from his wife's condition and family-in-law that despises him. Freedom in the wilderness where the problems seemed so far away. But with this park's mystery, it became the new focus, the new problem to deal with. There was a life and death feel to the situation, especially at that middle point. But a part of me thinks that's what Henry wanted. It made him so present in his situation, and the rest of the world just faded away. But when everything's resolved, while there is a sense of relief in it, there's also a reminder that he has other things to deal with. This mystery didn't have lasting repercussions that affected the entire world. Henry and Delilah weren't rewarded for their service besides their paychecks. Solving the case didn't fix his wife's condition, and that's a problem that doesn't have an indication for a time limit. It feels like an anticlimax, and it reminds me of the conclusion I came to a year ago. I made a video on Firewatch about a year ago, and it meant a lot to me. It was the first one I made that was my honest attempt to take YouTube seriously. Production-wise, I made plenty of mistakes, but I'm so proud of it regardless. And my conclusion of it was that no matter where you go running away from your problems, they'll always find a way to creep up on you. You can become a park ranger and get embroiled in a mystery, but those problems you ran away from will be quietly waiting for you when you're done. And I still stand by that view of the ending. I also want to add to it with my recent playthrough, and that being, your problems will always catch up with you. But you can handle them on your own terms. The ending has Delilah recommending that Henry should visit his wife and try to make it work. You can pick however you want to respond to that, but for mine, I figured I might as well try. The two have shared most of their lives together, and with my version of this character, this time away was enough to remind him why it was worth fighting for her in the first place. I loved this view because it makes Henry more of a heroic figure. Ned Goodwin had been hiding in the woods since his son Brian died, and it's assumed he'll stay there until he dies. He doesn't want to face the repercussions for his son, but as time goes on, his self-exile will be much more painful and arguably more cruel than turning himself into the authorities. Ned is a mirror of Henry. Both men have faced tragedy with one they deeply cared for. Ned's response is to hide away from the world. In this version, after gathering his strength, Henry faces it once again. And that's what I find so remarkable about Firewatch. Henry is at once his own person and your creation, and this story of taking some time away before tackling your problems when you're ready really struck with me. And it might for you too if you give it a try. So that concludes this tour of Firewatch in Old Shoshone. I'm gonna backtrack and pick up some cool pine cones, but I hope you enjoyed this video. My name here on YouTube is Pollymacho, but feel free to call me Alex. Thanks a bunch for watching. If you want to be notified of any future Macho recommendations I make, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Have a good one, my friend, and don't forget to enjoy the summer.
And there ain't no gals to keep no score.